Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to Study Skills. This is session 1 and we'll be talking about organizational skills and how we learn. A little bit about myself, the speaker. My name is Ms. Buoniconti and I am currently a DePaul University graduate student pursuing counseling. I am a former elementary school teacher. I taught second grade for the past 6 years and I'm currently for my internship working at a high school as a school counselor intern. So here's today's agenda. I'm going to politely ask you to please take the pre-test, which you'll see on the next slide. Then we're going to go over some organizational skills and talk about how we learn. We'll talk about next steps, and finally I'm going to ask you to also take the post-test. So here's the pretest. All you have to do is click here and it will pull it up for you on your computer. It is a Qualtrics survey. There's only a few questions, and once you take the pretest, then you can continue to listen to the rest of the presentation, and hopefully you'll take the post-test so I can see if this presentation was helpful or if you learned anything. And all of your responses will be kept confidential. They will be private, so they won't be shared. No personal information will be shared with anyone. And I just want to say thank you so much for participating and taking the pre and post test and helping me out. So next we're going to talk about how to get organized. So here are some examples of different materials that you can utilize that are going to help you get organized and stay organized. So some of these might seem very straightforward, but they can really make a difference if you start implementing them. So the first example would be a planner or an assignment notebook. So maybe you were able to kind of skate by in high school or grade school without having to use one, and let's say now you're in high school, maybe you're a freshman, and so these are some tools that would be super helpful to start utilizing. So with the planner assignment notebook, you can actually write out the days that your homework assignments were assigned, the different activities that they were. Or you can also have reminders on the days when they're due. So those are two different strategies that can be helpful for students. Calendar, what's nice about that is you could also include other responsibilities that you might have, whether that's days that you're working at your job, whether that's clubs or sports, extracurriculars that you're involved in school. So that's another great and simple, easy way to remain organized. The third example listed there is a checklist, and so you could write out all the different to-dos that you have and have that satisfaction of crossing them off your list once they are completed. In regards to homework, you could actually list the days that they're due, or you could even have your checklist prioritized by what needs to get done first and what's the most important task. And then the last, I just want to point out that there are apps and different things that you can utilize on your phone, like phone reminders, that can help you stay organized. Additionally, you can set timers and alarms for yourself of when a reminder when something is due. You could set a timer or an alarm for yourself while studying. So for example, you could say, I'm going to study for an hour and then take a 10-minute break. So you can actually kind of map out your day, map out your time that way. And those are just, again, some simple and hopefully helpful ways to keep you organized in regards to materials. Now the next slide, how do you learn? So I also want to touch on, in regards to, in addition to just materials, I want to touch on environment. So are you the type of person that needs a quiet learning environment and a quiet space? Or are you okay when the TV's on and your siblings are talking and your parents are in and out? So think about that and what type of environment suits you best. We're also going to touch on some learning style inventories, some memory techniques, graphic organizers, and mind maps on the next slides. So learning style inventories can be super beneficial because it can help you just learn more about yourself as a learner. And so I've provided two different examples here. One is a paper and pencil test that you could take, and the other is actually an online survey. So if you don't know what type of learning style you have, then I encourage you right now to take one or even both of those tests, and you can pause the presentation and come back to it. But this is going to be super helpful information for you to know as a learner and it's also going to hopefully impact the way that you study. Here I've listed out 10 common memory techniques, and again, this is just some good reminders for when you're studying. The first one is mnemonic devices. So I automatically think of Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally at PEMDAS, and that helped me remember the order of operations. So you might also be familiar with ones regarding the order of the planets. So just again, mnemonic devices can help you memorize information and its order. The second memory technique listed there is note cards. And so very simple, the term goes on the front, you're putting additional information or the definition on the back, and that is, again, another great way to study. They're light, you can carry them around with you. The third example listed there is reading things aloud or repeating them. And so again, that's just really going to solidify that information in your brain, and the more you read it, the more you repeat it, hopefully the better chance you have of remembering it. The fourth technique there is mind maps. You might be familiar with this as webbing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in another presentation in the next webinar if you tune into that one. But the goal of the mind map is really just to get any information down that comes to your mind about that topic. And you do that visually or writing it out, so helpful to see it that way. The fifth example there is creating practice tests. I always tell my students that if you can explain a concept to a kindergartner, then that shows me that you really know what that information means and what it's all about. So creating practice tests can also help you make sure that you know the most important information. Going along with those practice tests, number 6 is teaching someone, and I just explained that one. Number 7, diagrams. We'll get into a few examples on the next slide, but that can be a helpful way of presenting information visually. Number 8, rewriting. So writing and writing again, the information can really help you memorize it, and writing it down actually is more beneficial than just typing it out. So I encourage you to physically write it with paper and pen. Number 9, another technique for memory would be just listening. So you can listen to yourself, record yourself and listen to you talking about your notes or reading the chapter, or if you have a lecture recorded from a teacher and listening to that information again can be helpful. And then again, the last memory technique is another one that we'll be exploring in further detail in the next webinar, but it's called SQ3R. And it has to do with surveying the chapter, developing questions about the chapter, and then reading, reciting, and reviewing your questions. On the bottom of this slide, I have a link for a website that also gives you more study skills and resources, so feel free to check that out. Alright, so our next slide talks about graphic organizers, and I listed a few different examples of graphic organizers that you're probably familiar with below. The first one is a Venn diagram, and that can help you organize information because you are comparing, putting things that are similar down, and contrasting, listing things that are differences between two different topics. The next example is a KWL chart, and that stands for writing things you know about a topic, things that you want to learn or want to know, and the last one you'd fill out when you're done reading the chapter, and that's things that you did learn about the topic. The next example of a graphic organizer would be cause and effect. And lastly, I listed a graphic organizer called the hamburger paragraph writing graphic organizer, and have a picture of it to your right. And that is just to make sure that you had a topic sentence, 3 key details, and a closing sentence, a conclusion statement. So that can really just help when you are writing a paragraph. Right, here's an example of the mind map. So again, writing the topic or the idea in the center and just putting branches off of it of other things that come to mind. There is also a video on this slide about mind maps if you would like to check that out and get some more information that way. So for next steps, there are actually 2 more webinars that you can tune into. And the next 2 webinars will cover note-taking strategies, and we'll give examples of 3 specific strategies that you can use. It will also cover goal setting and mindfulness. So if you took the pretest at this time, please click on the red underlined word here and it will take you to the post-test. And once again, your information will be kept confidential. And I'd like to just thank you so much for taking the time to tune in to our first webinar and for taking the pre and post test.